April 6, 1945. Tokuyama Bay, Japan. Admiral Seiichi Ito stands on the bridge of the battleship Yamato, watching his crew prepare for their final mission. The ship beneath his feet is the largest, most powerful battleship ever constructed by any nation. 72,000 tons fully loaded, 9 18.1-inch guns that can hurl shells weighing over 3,000 pounds, more than 25 miles. Armor plating up to 16 inches thick on the turrets, 26 inches on the conning tower. This ship was designed to be unsinkable, unstoppable, invincible. But Ito knows the truth. Yamato is already dead. She just hasn't stopped moving yet. The mission is called Operation Tengo, meaning heavenly operation, though there's nothing heavenly about it. Yamato will sail to Okinawa with a small escort force, beach herself on the island's shore, and use her massive guns as stationary artillery to destroy American forces invading Okinawa. Once her ammunition is exhausted, the crew will go ashore and fight as infantry until they're all killed. It's a suicide mission disguised as a naval operation, a waste of Japan's greatest warship and 3,000 lives to accomplish. What land-based artillery could do better? Yamato protested the mission to his superiors, arguing that Yamato should be preserved for homeland defense, or that, if she must be sacrificed, then at least give her enough fuel for a round trip so she can maneuver and fight properly. The response was brutal and simple. Japan has lost the war. Okinawa will fall. American invasion of the home islands is coming. Yamato will die eventually, either from air attack at anchor or scuttled to prevent capture. Better she die fighting, taking some Americans with her, showing the world that Japanese warriors still have fighting spirit even in defeat. They give Yamato enough fuel for a one-way trip. Barely 2,500 tons when her full capacity is over 6,500 tons. Not enough for sustained combat operations. Not enough for evasive maneuvering. Not enough to run if things go wrong. Just enough to reach Okinawa and die there. The fuel allocation alone tells Ito everything he needs to know about what Imperial Headquarters really thinks of this mission. They're sending Yamato to die, nothing more. The escort force is pathetic by any standard. 1 light cruiser Yahagi and 8 destroyers. That's all. No air cover because Japan has no carriers left, and barely any aircraft that can reach Okinawa and return. No submarine support. No additional surface ships. Just Yamato, 1 cruiser, and 8 destroyers sailing into waters controlled by hundreds of American ships and thousands of American aircraft. It's not a naval operation. It's a funeral procession. The crew knows it too. They're mostly young sailors, teenagers, and men in their early 20s who've never seen combat. The veteran crew members who survived Pearl Harbor, Midway, and Philippine Sea are mostly dead or transferred to other duties. These young men board Yamato knowing they won't return, writing final letters to families, leaving personal belongings behind, making peace with death before the mission even begins. Some are eager, believing the propaganda about glorious death for the emperor. Others are terrified, but hide it behind duty and discipline. All of them board the ship and prepare to die because orders are orders and refusing means disgrace for their families. The mission planning is deliberately vague about what happens after Yamato reaches Okinawa. The official orders say beach the ship and use her as artillery, but everyone knows the ship will never reach Okinawa. American submarines, aircraft, and surface ships control every approach to the island. Yamato will be detected, tracked, and attacked long before she gets close. The mission is suicide, pure and simple, and calling it anything else is just face-saving lies. Vice Admiral Ryunosuke Kosaka, commander of the Combined Fleet, visits Yamato before departure and gives a speech about honor, duty, and the warrior spirit. He tells the crew they're carrying Japan's hopes, that their sacrifice will inspire the nation, that their names will be remembered forever. The crew listens in silence, faces expressionless, knowing they're being sent to die for no strategic purpose, other than satisfying old men's need to feel like they're still fighting. After Kosaka leaves, Ito gathers his officers and tells them the truth. This is a suicide mission. They will not reach Okinawa. They will die at sea. Each man must decide how to face that death with whatever honor he can find. April 6, 1945 at 1600 hours. Yamato and her escorts depart Tokuyama Bay, heading southwest through the Bungo Strait into the open ocean. The weather is overcast with low clouds and occasional rain. Good weather for concealment, but not good enough. American submarines are already waiting and tracking Japanese fleet movements. USS Threadfin and USS Hackleback pick up the formation as it exits the strait and begins shadowing, sending position reports that alert every American unit in the area that Yamato is at sea and heading toward Okinawa. Admiral Raymond Spruance commands the 5th Fleet supporting the Okinawa invasion, and he receives the submarine reports with cold calculation. Yamato is the last major Japanese surface combatant, a symbol of Japanese naval power that survived the entire war. Sinking her will be both strategically valuable and symbolically important. He orders his carrier task forces to prepare strikes, giving priority to finding and destroying Yamato before she can reach Okinawa or threaten American forces. Task Force 58 under Vice Admiral Mark Mitcher has 11 fleet carriers and 6 light carriers with over 1,200 aircraft available. Mitcher is a carrier aviation pioneer who understands that battleships are obsolete in modern naval warfare, that aircraft carriers replace them as capital ships, and that Yamato represents the old order trying desperately to remain relevant in a world that's moved past battleships. He's eager to prove this point by sinking the world's largest battleship using carrier aircraft, demonstrating once and for all that the age of the battleship is finished. The weather on April 7th is better for flying with broken clouds and improved visibility. American search planes from Essex locate Yamato's force at 0823 hours about 200 miles southwest of Kyushu, steaming south at 20 knots. The position report reaches Mitcher within minutes, and he orders immediate strikes. Every available aircraft will launch to attack Yamato and her escorts. This won't be a precision strike against specific targets. It will be a mass attack designed to overwhelm defenses and sink everything through sheer weight of numbers. The first wave launches at 1,000 hours with 280 aircraft, including fighters, dive bombers, and torpedo bombers from multiple carriers. They form up and head northwest toward the intercept point, flying at various altitudes to complicate Japanese anti-aircraft fire. The pilots are veterans who've flown countless missions against Japanese forces, and they're excited about attacking Yamato because sinking a battleship, especially the super battleship, is something to brag about for the rest of their lives. Aboard Yamato, the radar operators pick up incoming aircraft at 12:32 hours, reporting large formations approaching from the southeast. Ito knows this is it, the attack he's been expecting, the death he's been prepared for. He orders the fleet to increase speed to 25 knots and begin evasive maneuvers. Though with limited fuel, this creates its own problems because every high-speed turn burns fuel they can't replace. The anti-aircraft crews man their stations. Over 150 anti-aircraft guns ranging from 5-inch to 25 millimeter, all ready to throw up a curtain of steel against incoming aircraft. But Yamato's anti-aircraft suite has a critical weakness. Most of her anti-aircraft guns are 25 millimeter Type 96 guns that are short-ranged, slow-firing, and ineffective against aircraft attacking at high speed. The 5-inch guns are better, but there aren't enough of them, and they lack proximity fuses which American ships have had for years. Japanese anti-aircraft doctrine is inferior to American doctrine, with less emphasis on coordinated fire direction and more reliance on individual gun crews engaging targets independently. Against a small attack, this would be manageable, but against 280 aircraft attacking simultaneously from multiple directions, Yamato's defenses are simply inadequate. The American aircraft arrive at 12:41 hours and immediately begin coordinating their attack. Fighters strafe the ships to suppress anti-aircraft fire, while torpedo bombers approach from both sides and dive bombers attack from above. This coordinated attack from multiple directions and altitudes is designed to overwhelm the ship's ability to respond, forcing defenders to choose which threat to engage while others attack unopposed. The first torpedo hits Yamato's port side at 12:43 hours, punching through the anti-torpedo bulge and flooding several compartments. The battleship was designed to withstand multiple torpedo hits with elaborate underwater protection systems, including layered bulkheads and void spaces to absorb blast energy. One torpedo doesn't significantly threaten the ship, but it's just the beginning. More torpedoes follow. 3 more hits on the port side within minutes. Then 2 on the starboard side as torpedo bombers attack from both directions. Bombs hit simultaneously with 1,000-pound armor-piercing bombs penetrating the deck and exploding inside the ship. One bomb hits near the mainmast, starting fires. Another hits the stern, damaging the steering mechanism. A third penetrates the armored deck and explodes in a machinery space, killing dozens of crew and damaging propulsion. The combination of torpedo and bomb hits creates multiple fires, flooding and casualties that strain the damage control. Crews beyond their capacity to respond effectively, Yamato begins listing to port as flooding from torpedo hits overwhelms the counter-flooding systems designed to maintain stability. The list reaches 5 degrees and 10 degrees, reducing the effectiveness of anti-aircraft guns on the port side because they can't elevate properly when the ship is heeling over. Ito orders counter-flooding on the starboard side to correct the list. But this adds water weight to the ship and reduces freeboard, making her sit lower in the water and more vulnerable to additional torpedo damage. The second wave of American aircraft arrives at Ives. 13:35 hours with another. 150 aircraft attacking the now crippled battleship. Yamato is slower now, making only 18 knots, and the list makes her less maneuverable, easier to target. The escort ships are fighting their own battles, with several already sinking or dead in the water. The light cruiser Yahagi takes multiple torpedo hits and capsizes at 14:05 hours, taking nearly all her crew with her. The destroyers are being systematically destroyed, with 4 sinking during the afternoon and the survivors fleeing at high speed to avoid Yamato's fate. More torpedoes slam into Yamato's hull, concentrating on the port side where she's already listing, accelerating the flooding and increasing the heel angle. The list reaches 15 degrees and 20 degrees, and damage control can no longer compensate. Water floods through damaged compartments, through open doors and hatches that should be closed but can't be, because crew need to move through the ship to fight fires and rescue wounded. The electrical systems fail in flooded areas, leaving sections of the ship dark and powerless. Communications break down as cables are severed and phone systems fail. The ship is dying section by section, compartment by compartment. At 1400 hours, Ito realizes Yamato won't survive and orders abandon ship preparations, though he knows most of the crew won't escape because the ship is still under attack and the water is cold and rescue is unlikely. He remains on the bridge with his staff, refusing to abandon his post, accepting death as the consequence of leading men on a suicide mission. The junior officers try to convince him to evacuate, but he refuses, saying a commander who sends men to die must be willing to die himself. He sends final messages to shore headquarters reporting the ship's condition and then prepares for the end. The third wave of aircraft arrives at 14:17 hours with another 100 aircraft attacking the wallowing battleship. Yamato can barely maneuver now, listing over 30 degrees to port, her speed reduced to just 5 knots. She's a stationary target being systematically destroyed by aircraft, attacking with near impunity because her anti-aircraft fire is minimal now, with many guns out of action due to the list. Flooding or crew casualties. 2 more torpedoes hit the port side at 14:20 hours, and these are the killing blows. The list increases dramatically to 45 degrees as water floods through massive holes in the hull. Yamato is capsizing, rolling over like a dying whale, her massive bulk turning slowly but inevitably toward the sea. Sailors pour out of hatches and doors, sliding down the tilting deck into the water, trying to swim clear before the ship's suction pulls them under. Thousands of men are still trapped inside the ship, in flooded compartments, in darkness, in spaces that are rapidly becoming tombs. At 14:23 hours, Yamato's forward magazines explode. Over 100 tons of propellant and shells detonate simultaneously, creating an explosion so massive it can be seen over 100 miles away. A mushroom cloud rises thousands of feet into the air, visible to American pilots who witnessed the death of the super battleship. The explosion breaks Yamato's back, literally snapping the ship in two, and both sections sink rapidly. Within minutes, the largest battleship ever built has disappeared beneath the waves, taking Admiral Ito and over 3,000 sailors with her. The American pilots circle the debris, watching oil fires burn on the water, watching survivors struggle in the oily water, watching the escort destroyers attempt rescue operations while still dodging American aircraft. The attack continues against the surviving escorts, with 2 more destroyers sunk before the Americans finally break off at 1500 hours. Having expended their weapons and needing to return to their carriers before fuel runs low, of Yamato's crew of 2,700 officers and men, only 276 survive. Most died in the explosions, drowned in flooded compartments, or succumbed to hypothermia in the cold water, waiting for rescue that came too slowly. Admiral Ito died on the bridge when the ship capsized. Captain Kasaku Ariga, Yamato's commanding officer, lashed himself to the compass binnacle and went down with his ship, fulfilling the tradition of captains dying with their commands. The survivors were picked up by the escort destroyers that survived. The attack and returned to Japan as broken men carrying the memory of friends and shipmates who died in a mission that accomplished nothing. The light cruiser Yahagi sank with 446 crew killed. 4 destroyers were sunk, with over 1,000 sailors dead across all the escorts. Of the 10 ships that departed on Operation Tengo, only 4 destroyers returned to Japan. The mission accomplished nothing strategically. Yamato never reached Okinawa, never fired her main guns at American forces, never beached herself to serve as artillery. She died at sea, far from her objective, destroyed by aircraft that she couldn't effectively defend against. American losses were minimal. 10 aircraft were shot down with 12 aircrew killed or missing. No American ships were damaged or even seriously threatened. The exchange ratio was devastatingly one-sided, as it had been throughout the Pacific War whenever Japanese surface ships encountered American carrier aviation. Aircraft destroyed ships with near impunity while suffering minimal losses, proving once again that the battleship era was over and the carrier was now the dominant naval weapon. The sinking of Yamato marked the end of battleship supremacy in naval warfare. For 400 years, battleships had been the ultimate expression of naval power, the ships that controlled the seas and decided battles through gunnery duels between massive armored vessels. Yamato represented the pinnacle of battleship design, the most powerful such ship ever constructed. armed and armored to fight and win any battleship engagement. But she never fought another battleship, because by 1945, such engagements were obsolete, replaced by carrier aircraft attacking from beyond visual range before. Battleships could even fire their guns. The Japanese believed in battleship supremacy when they designed and built Yamato in the late 1930s. They believed that one super battleship could defeat 2 or 3 normal battleships. That quality could overcome quantity. That superior gunnery and armor could win battles against numerically superior enemies. But they were wrong. The carrier replaced the battleship as the capital ship, and no amount of armor or firepower could protect a surface ship from massed air attack. Yamato proved this in the worst possible way by dying without accomplishing anything against enemies she never even saw. The strategic situation in April 1945 was desperate for Japan. Okinawa was being invaded by overwhelming American forces and would fall within months. The home islands were being bombed regularly by B-29 superfortresses based in the Marianas. The Japanese fleet had been destroyed across multiple battles with no possibility of replacement. Japan's merchant marine was devastated by American submarines and could no longer transport food, fuel, or raw materials needed to sustain the war effort. The war was lost by any objective measure, but Japanese military culture wouldn't accept surrender, wouldn't admit defeat, wouldn't seek peace negotiations. Instead, they chose symbolic gestures like Operation 10 Go, sending ships and men to die pointlessly rather than surrendering them intact or preserving them for homeland defense. The kamikaze attacks on American ships off Okinawa were another example of this mindset, as were the banzai charges, the refusal to surrender by isolated garrisons, and the rhetoric about fighting to the last Japanese. This wasn't military strategy. It was cultural suicide disguised as fighting spirit. Yamato's sacrifice accomplished nothing militarily, but it satisfied the Japanese High Command's need to feel like they were still fighting, still resisting, still showing warrior spirit even in defeat. The ship's death was meaningless strategically, but meaningful symbolically to people who valued symbols more than lives. 3,000 men died so that old admirals could tell themselves that Japanese warriors never surrender. That defeat with honor is better than survival with shame. That death is preferable to capture. The crew of Yamato deserved better than being wasted in a suicide mission that accomplished nothing. They were brave men following orders in a war their nation had already lost. Many were teenagers on their first naval assignment, too young to understand what they were dying for, believing the propaganda about glorious sacrifice. The veterans knew better, but followed orders anyway, because that's what military discipline demands. They all died because their leaders couldn't accept reality, couldn't admit defeat, couldn't prioritize their lives over symbolic gestures. The loss of Yamato was more than just a ship sinking. It was the end of an era, the death of battleship supremacy, the final proof that carriers had replaced battleships as the dominant naval weapon. Every navy in the world took notice. After World War II, no nation would build battleships again except to complete ships already under construction. The future belonged to carriers, submarines, and eventually missiles. The battleship became obsolete overnight, relegated to museums and maritime history books. The wreck of Yamato was discovered in 1985 by a Japanese research team, lying in over 1,100 feet of water about 200 miles southwest of Kyushu. The ship broke into multiple sections when she sank, with the bow and stern separated and debris scattered across the seafloor. The wreck is a war grave, protected by Japanese law, visited occasionally by researchers, and commemorated by survivors and families of the crew. Video footage of the wreck shows her massive gun turrets resting on the bottom, her armor plating still intact, her superstructure collapsed but recognizable. She's a ghost from another era, a testament to the power and futility of battleships in an age of aircraft carriers. Every year on April 7th, ceremonies are held in Japan, honoring the crew of Yamato and the other ships lost in Operation Tengo. Survivors attend when they're still alive, fewer each year as time passes, sharing memories of the mission and honoring friends who died. The ceremonies emphasize sacrifice, duty, and honor, values that Japanese culture prizes highly. But some survivors speak more honestly about the waste, the futility, the unnecessary deaths of men sent on a mission that was suicide from the start. The debate continues in Japan about whether Operation Tengo was a legitimate military operation or a criminal waste of lives. Some argue that Yamato's crew died honorably fulfilling their duty, that their sacrifice inspired the nation and showed Japanese fighting spirit. Others argue that sending men to certain death in a suicide mission was murder disguised as military strategy, that the crew was sacrificed for symbolic value rather than strategic necessity, that their deaths accomplished nothing except satisfying old men's pride. The truth is probably somewhere between these extremes. The crew of Yamato followed orders in a war they didn't start and couldn't stop. They were brave men doing their duty as they understood it, accepting death because their culture demanded it and their commanders ordered it. Whether their sacrifice was honorable or wasted depends on your perspective, your values, and your understanding of what military duty requires of soldiers in impossible situations. What's undeniable is that Yamato's sinking marked a turning point in naval warfare. The age of the battleship ended on April 7, 1945, when the largest, most powerful battleship ever built was destroyed by aircraft she couldn't defend against. Every naval engagement afterward would be dominated by carriers and aircraft, by submarines and missiles, by weapons that could strike from beyond visual range. The battleship's day was over, ended not by another battleship in a climactic gun duel, but by aircraft swarming like insects, stinging repeatedly until the giant fell. The American pilots who attacked Yamato returned to their carriers, proud of their achievement, knowing they'd participated in a historic action that would be remembered for decades. They'd sunk the super battleship, proven carrier aviation supremacy, and eliminated the last major Japanese surface combatant. Some felt sympathy for the Japanese sailors they'd killed, recognizing that they were fellow warriors caught in an impossible situation. Others felt only satisfaction at destroying an enemy ship, viewing it as revenge for Pearl Harbor, revenge for American ships sunk, revenge for friends killed in earlier battles. The American Navy celebrated Yamato's sinking as a major victory, proof that American carriers controlled the Pacific, that Japanese naval power was finished, that the war was effectively won. Admiral Nimitz sent congratulations to Mitcher and the carrier task forces, praising their efficiency in destroying a major enemy unit with minimal American casualties. The action was studied at naval academies as an example of proper carrier strike tactics, coordination between multiple carriers, and overwhelming force application. But some American officers felt the battle was unnecessary, that Yamato was already irrelevant, that sinking her was overkill against a ship that posed no real threat. They argued that the aircraft could have been better used supporting the Okinawa invasion or attacking targets in Japan itself, that expending ordnance against one ship was wasteful when other targets were more strategically important. These minority opinions were ignored in the celebration of victory, but they raised valid questions about whether destroying Yamato was strategically necessary or just symbolically satisfying. The strategic impact of Yamato's loss was minimal, because the ship was already irrelevant to Japan's situation. With or without Yamato, Japan was losing the war and would be forced to surrender within months. The ship's death didn't change anything strategically, didn't alter the course of the war, didn't make American victory more certain, because victory was already certain. What it did do was eliminate a symbol, prove a point about battleship obsolescence, and provide a morale boost to American forces and a morale blow to Japan. For Japan, losing Yamato was psychologically devastating, even if strategically meaningless. The ship represented Japanese engineering excellence, naval power, and military might. Its loss symbolized that Japan had been surpassed, that American industrial and technological superiority had won the war before it even started. The 3,000 men who died on Yamato symbolized the futility of continuing the war, the waste of lives in a cause that was already lost, the tragedy of military culture that valued death over surrender. The lessons from Yamato's sinking extended far beyond naval warfare. The ship's death demonstrated that quality doesn't necessarily defeat quantity, that technological superiority in one area doesn't guarantee victory, that adapting to new technology matters more than perfecting old technology. Japan built the ultimate battleship, just as battleships became obsolete. America built carriers and carrier aircraft, recognizing that the future of naval warfare lay in aviation, not gunnery. That adaptability, that willingness to embrace new technology and new tactics, was a major reason America won the Pacific War. Another lesson was about suicide missions and their military value. Operation Tengo accomplished nothing except killing thousands of men and losing valuable ships. The mission was conceived as a morale gesture, a symbolic sacrifice to show Japanese fighting spirit. But military operations should accomplish strategic objectives, not just satisfy cultural needs for symbolic gestures. Yamato's death didn't slow the American advance, didn't save Okinawa, didn't prevent Japan's defeat. It was a waste, pure and simple, dressed up in language about honor and duty to disguise the waste. The survivors of Yamato carried trauma for the rest of their lives. They watched thousands of friends die in a mission that accomplished nothing, survived through luck or position on the ship, and had to live with memories of that day for decades afterward. Some spoke about their experiences, sharing stories of the battle and honoring fallen comrades. Others refused to discuss it, unable to process the trauma or unwilling to relive those memories. All of them struggled with survivors' guilt, wondering why they lived when so many died, questioning whether their survival had meaning or purpose. The families of the men who died on Yamato received official notifications of death in service to the emperor, ceremonial honors, and rhetoric about glorious sacrifice. But notifications and ceremonies don't bring back loved ones, don't fill the emptiness left by fathers, brothers, and sons who died in a naval battle far from home. Thousands of families mourned men who died on Yamato, trying to find meaning in deaths that seemed increasingly meaningless as the war's futility became undeniable. Today, Yamato is remembered differently in different places. In Japan, she's commemorated as a symbol of sacrifice, with museums dedicated to her history, memorials honoring her crew, and ceremonies marking the anniversary of her sinking. The narrative emphasizes duty, honor, and sacrifice, values that resonate in Japanese culture. In America, she's remembered as a trophy, the super battleship destroyed by American carrier aviation, proof of American technological and tactical superiority. The narrative emphasizes victory, dominance, and the obsolescence of battleships. Both narratives contain truth, but neither tells the complete story. Yamato was a magnificent ship, an engineering marvel, beautifully designed and powerfully armed. She was also obsolete before she was completed, irrelevant to modern naval warfare, wasted in a suicide mission that accomplished nothing. Her crew were brave men following orders, but their bravery couldn't overcome the futility of their mission or the obsolescence of their ship. They died needlessly in a war their nation had already lost, sacrificed for symbolic value rather than strategic necessity. The sinking of Yamato reminds us that technology changes warfare, that nations must adapt or perish, that fighting spirit. And warrior culture can't overcome industrial and technological inferiority. Japan built the ultimate battleship and watched it die without firing its main guns at enemy ships. America built carriers and used them to destroy Japanese battleships, cruisers, and destroyers without those ships ever seeing their attackers. The lesson was clear then and remains clear now. Adapt to change or be destroyed by it. This is the story of Yamato, the super battleship that represented the end of an era. Built to be invincible, she proved to be vulnerable. Designed to dominate naval battles, she died without fighting one. Sent on a suicide mission, she accomplished nothing except dying. 3,000 men perished with her, brave men who deserved better than being wasted in a futile gesture. Their sacrifice reminds us of the cost of war, the futility of refusing. To accept defeat, and the tragedy of military cultures that value death over life. Remember Yamato. Remember her crew. Remember the futility of their sacrifice and the waste of their lives. Remember that ships are built by nations, but crewed by men. That strategic decisions kill real people. That honor and duty can be manipulated to justify murder. Remember that the super battleship died without accomplishing her mission. That her death proved battleships were obsolete. That her crew deserved better than the death they received. This is Yamato. This is April 7th, 1945. This is the death of the super battleship and the end of the battleship era. Remember it. Learn from it. Honor the dead without glorifying the waste. This is their story, their sacrifice, their tragedy. Never forget.